On November 9, 2013, the last corporate-owned Blockbuster closed its doors in Bend, Oregon. The final store, a relic of a bygone era, has since been turned into a museum dedicated to the VHS tapes and the late fees that once defined movie nights. Now, movie nights are all about sitting on the couch and streaming a movie through the wonders of the internet. The pioneer of streaming, and by far the biggest and most successful platform in the world today, is Netflix. Many people may not know that when they started, Netflix was not a streaming service. They were a rental by mail. In fact, they were Blockbuster's biggest direct competition, and in a world of perfect business management, the sheer size of Blockbuster's business would have seen off a newcomer like Netflix. But that's not the world that we live in. So now, while Netflix is winning Emmy Awards for original programming and raking in billions in subscription revenue, beaming its shows into living rooms across the globe, all that is left of the once vast Blockbuster network is a mock-up of the last store. A museum, a visitor attraction, nothing more than that. This is the story of how David took down Goliath and grew to be bigger than anyone could have imagined. How different things could have turned out if one fateful meeting in 2000 went differently will amaze you. Blockbuster was hardly a pioneer in the video rental space. Video rental stores had existed for around a decade before Blockbuster even came into existence. The first one on record was in Kassel, Germany, which rented out Super 8 film reels. It was opened by Eckhard Baum in 1975, and interestingly, they are still operational as of 2025. They evolved to include VHS and DVDs. Stores popped up across the US and Europe, and small chains like West Coast Video established themselves in the late 1970s and early 1980s. However, whilst Blockbuster was no trailblazer, when it first opened its doors in 1985, it changed the video rental market forever. That year, David Cook, a former computer software entrepreneur, opened the first Blockbuster in Dallas, Texas. The game-changing factor was Cook's expertise in database management. This allowed him to completely revolutionize video rentals. This meant that the new store could stock around 8,000 to 10,000 VHS tapes, which dwarfed the around 200 tapes that was held in most smaller stores. Rentals were tracked using barcodes and magnetic strips, and this also helped to deter theft. On opening night, staff had to keep locking the doors due to the sheer number of customers flocking to see what the new store had to offer. By 1994, Blockbuster had over 1,000 stores across the world. It wasn't just about the number of stores. Blockbuster had become more than a video rental chain. It had become an experience and was soon cemented in pop culture. Blockbuster stores turned into community hubs where families bonded over debates about new releases, and teens lingered in aisles, turning the movie selection into a social event. The ritual of browsing the physical tapes became a tactile experience that today's streaming services can never replicate. Employees nicknamed video priests became cultural gatekeepers, steering customers toward cult classics or hidden gems. They became trusted experts, helping millions of people find their new favorite movie. The impact of the brand on popular culture can be seen in the 1990s media. Clerks from 1994 filmed scenes in a Blockbuster-esque store, while Swingers from 1996 used its aisles to show post-breakup escapism in all its glory. TV shows like Friends and The Goldbergs later referenced Blockbuster as a thing of pure 90s nostalgia. The act of renting a movie became a rite of passage, and this was far more than just another business. People enjoyed visiting Blockbuster just as much as they enjoyed watching the movie they took home. Blockbuster's corporate empire peaked in the late 1990s, fueled by Viacom's resources and aggressive expansion. In 1994, the chain was acquired by Viacom for $8.4 billion, and it became part of a media powerhouse alongside MTV and Paramount. This merger hoped to leverage Blockbuster's retail network to help distribute Viacom's content, but early cracks were beginning to form. Wayne Huizenga was already warning of threats like video on demand, which was slowly taking shape, but Blockbuster did not take these threats seriously, not until it was too late to react. By 1996, Blockbuster had moved into music, purchasing Sound Warehouse and Music Plus to launch Blockbuster music stores. However, the CD borrowing field quickly became impossible to make money on due to the rise of digital piracy and the people choosing to purchase rather than borrow their music. Strange, considering today music piracy is nowhere near as much of an issue, and most people stream their music from subscription services, never owning a single track. In 1999, Viacom sold off a minority share of 18% into public traded stocks to cover debt from its Paramount deal. It's odd that the absolute peak of Blockbuster as a business was in 2004 when it had 9,094 stores globally, including franchises and over 84,000 employees, managing 65 million weekly rentals. Revenue peaked at $6 billion annually, dwarfing any rivals still left standing. However, those numbers tell only half the story. Overexpansion had left a debt of over $1 billion, and new firms were popping up, cutting out the storefront and delivering directly to people's doorsteps. It would take just a decade for Blockbuster to completely collapse, but the story of its fall is as intriguing as its rise. Meanwhile, one of those direct delivery rental services was slowly picking up steam, laying the foundation for what would later become the #1 streaming service worldwide. Netflix was founded in 1997 by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph in Scotts Valley, California, as a DVD-by-mail rental service. The idea supposedly came to Hastings after he was charged a $40 late fee for renting Apollo 13, which inspired the concept Netflix would build itself around. No late fees. While this story is always told about Netflix, Randolph himself later admitted it was a PR stunt and not entirely true. The first test the founders ran was to send a CD in a small greetings card envelope to test whether it was possible to mail a disc without it being damaged. The CD arrived intact and Netflix was born. They launched the website in 1998, offering 925 titles through a traditional paper rental model with late fees applied. However, the company pivoted to a subscription-based model in 1999, allowing customers unlimited rentals for a flat fee and, importantly, no late fees. This became one of Netflix's defining features in its early days. By putting its catalog online instead of relying on physical storefronts, Netflix ensured that every customer had access to its full library rather than being limited to local availability, something Blockbuster couldn't do. Viral stunts helped grow the company. During the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, Netflix offered the President's Testimony DVD for 2 cents. Then, to make things more bizarre, a shipping error sends pornographic DVDs to customers. Rather than bury the business, the viral mishap netted them 5,000 new subscribers. Amazon offered $14 to $16 million to acquire Netflix in 1998. Hastings, who still owned 70% of the shares in the company, rejected it, foreseeing the potential that Netflix had to grow in the future. This is where Blockbuster comes back into the picture and is the pivot of the whole story. This fierce rivalry that illustrates a huge shift in the way we consume media today, had a sliding doors moment in 2000. The young Netflix offered itself up to Blockbuster. The idea was to combine the subscription online model with the already established and thriving retail-based model of the two companies. Netflix wanted $15 million, which in hindsight was a snip. Blockbuster CEO at the time, John Ontiaco, rejected the offer, dismissing streaming and online rentals as niche markets. How wrong could someone possibly be? The decision is now regarded as one of the biggest missed opportunities in business history. Netflix went public in 2002, selling 5.5 million shares at $15 each and raising $82.5 million. Despite some people remaining skeptical about its unproven and untested model, the company reached 1 million subscribers by 2003. During this time, Netflix also began stocking Blu-ray discs, betting on the future of high-definition formats, while competitors like Blockbuster remained focused on DVDs. This would become a theme throughout the 2000s for Blockbuster: missed opportunities and huge risks, some that worked, some that didn't, and some that they dropped too soon. Their first gamble was in 2004, finally realizing that Netflix was actually onto something with the rental by mail model. Blockbuster launched Blockbuster Online. Whilst they were late to react, having dismissed Netflix and allowing it to get a head start, the cult status of the Blockbuster brand meant that if they got this right, it could have lessened the head start Netflix had. Sadly, they didn't get it right. Far from it. It did the same thing as Netflix, but it was a completely different service to Blockbuster's in-store experience, meaning customers had to set up a completely separate account to use it. This is, of course, an off-putting prospect when you're trying to sell a new service to existing customers, and it made it less appealing than combining everything under one single account. There was also an inventory issue. Stores only offered around 3,000 titles, but online users could select from over 60,000, meaning the two services were even less aligned. Whilst Netflix was already exploring the idea of streaming, Blockbuster marketed Blockbuster Online as a more efficient and quick rental by mail service, showing that even though they were aware of the threat posed by Netflix, they were still far behind the curve and not willing to accept streaming was the future. Due to the lackluster launch of Blockbuster Online in 2004, the business posted a loss of $1.2 billion. Not enough to kill off a business of Blockbuster size, but every misstep was going to begin adding up very soon. The next blunder was just a year later. Another response to Netflix's rise led Blockbuster to do something that went against its entire business model. They abolished the late fee. An attempt to boost the customer experience the brand offered ended up costing Blockbuster $200 million annually as customers kept DVDs longer, reducing inventory turnover and rental income. Late fees had accounted for 16% of Blockbuster's revenue in 2000. That's $800 million, but the removal of the late fee totally messed up cash flow, and the gains just weren't enough to offset it. It was also highly misleading. Attorney General in 40 states sued Blockbuster for deceptive advertising, arguing the No Late Fees campaign masked new charges. Rentals now converted to purchases after 7 days, with customers billed full price unless they returned items within 30 days, incurring a $1.25 restocking fee, which sounded a lot like a late fee, the exact thing they weren't supposed to be charging anymore. New Jersey's lawsuit highlighted how customers only discovered charges on credit card statements, calling the policy misleading and incomplete. Blockbuster settled, paying $630,000 in costs and offering refunds, but the new internet age was booming and reputation now mattered more than the size of a retail footprint. Blockbuster was losing its appeal. That 90s nostalgia could only get you so far. Internally, there was a brief glimmer of hope. CEO John Anciaco came up with a policy to compete with Netflix. This would prioritize long-term customer retention and satisfaction over short-term profits. In the current business age, this is standard leadership. Once again, however, Blockbuster showed they were behind the times, and the board, pressured by their investors, ousted Anciaco after the CFO, Larry Zine, warned that this would completely kill profits in the short term. Anciaco's exit is probably the biggest indicator of what was to come over the next decade. The business wouldn't rest and accept defeat, however, and would try once again to innovate and evolve in 2006 with Total Access. In November 2006, Blockbuster launched this new service, a hybrid subscription program designed to outcompete Netflix. Finally, it looked like Blockbuster might be able to take back the ground Netflix had gained whilst the business floundered. The new model allowed subscribers to return DVDs by mail or exchange them in-store. This alone was something Netflix couldn't offer, making the most of Blockbuster's huge physical footprint and offering customers an instant in-store exchange alongside the convenience of mail delivery. Blockbuster's subscriber base boomed as a result, going up from 1.5 million to 3.6 million by mid-2007, which even outpaced Netflix for a short time, with Netflix reporting its first ever subscriber loss. However, this came at a cost. Each in-store exchange cost Blockbuster $2 in lost revenue and overhead, making the program completely unsustainable. Heavy users were able to exploit the system, cycling through dozens of DVDs monthly while Blockbuster absorbed all of the costs. On top of that, 30% of the stores, those that were franchised, refused to honor total access exchanges, completely ruining the concept. Carl Icahn, one of those investors that helped push John Onsiaco out of the door in 2005, was then responsible for perhaps the biggest mistake in this troubled period. He decided that profit needed to be the focus rather than growth, and in July 2007, new CEO Jim Keyes slashed total access benefits to try and make things more profitable. Whilst they could have waited it out and allowed total access to grow to a point where it could turn a profit, even if it was losing money in the short term, they faltered. Keyes introduced a $7 a month premium tier for unlimited in-store exchanges and capped standard plans at 2 to 5 exchanges per month, and the free monthly in-store rentals were also taken away. If you couldn't guess, this was a major blow for total access. The changes caused a subscriber exodus with over 500,000 customers leaving within months. Blockbuster claimed this was acceptable as they aimed to prune unprofitable subscribers, and all of the positive reactions to total access were wiped away. Keyes defended the decision, claiming it was necessary for financial stability, saying the company was not in the business of buying subscribers. He may not have realized it at the time. Buying subscribers was exactly the business they needed to be in. They needed all the help they could get. And just like that, the competition they were mounting to Netflix was over. That left the door wide open for Netflix to move past Blockbuster and completely change the entertainment industry forever. Blockbuster's billion-dollar debt, which came from these failed experiments with rent by mail and total access, along with the baggage from the 2004 sell-off from Viacom, finally forced them into Chapter 11 bankruptcy in September 2010. The idea was to slash debt to $100 million. However, creditors didn't want to think long-term and decided to cut costs instead of trying to modernize. The company's stock was delisted in early 2011, and the liquidation was the recommended outcome from the US establishment. Dish Network didn't see it that way. They wanted to take on their assets and managed to acquire them for $320 million, wrestling them clear of long-time investor Carl Icahn and the money-hungry creditors. The plan was to use the Blockbuster brand to compete with Netflix in the streaming business, whilst the brick-and-mortar stores sold satellite TV services alongside rentals. In theory, great. In practice, it could not have gone more wrong. Dish had just inherited a sinking ship. 3,300 Blockbuster stores started to hemorrhage cash as the business model failed to take off. DVD by mail lacked Netflix's logistics, and franchise disputes made it impossible to standardize things. Despite plans to keep the more than 500 stores open, closures grew and grew. Many landlords saw the writing on the wall and rejected new lease offers on many stores when agreements expired. The hopes of a real rivalry with Netflix over streaming numbers didn't really materialize into anything either. The outdated infrastructure simply couldn't compete with Netflix. By 2013, only one Blockbuster franchise remained. Dish had tried to save a US icon and failed miserably. In the time since, Netflix has become a symbol of everything Blockbuster could have been if only they had succeeded in moving with the times. Netflix introduced streaming in January 2007 as Watch Now, a free perk for DVD subscribers, initially offering 1,000 titles. It required a 1 megabit per second internet connection and gave pretty awful pixelated playback to anyone willing to try it. 2009, broadband was in 60% of US homes, making connection speed concerns a thing of the past. With technology catching up with Netflix's vision for streaming, subscribers under the $5.99 plan got 6 hours a month of streaming. The company's CEO, Reed Hastings, admitted its limitations but hoped it was the first step towards internet-based delivery, and he turned out to be right. In a strange contradiction, the leadership of Netflix was tuned in the exact way the leadership of Blockbuster wasn't. In May 2008, the Netflix player by Roku became the first dedicated streaming device, and that began to change everything. Later that same year, Netflix partnered with Microsoft to stream via Xbox Live, taking on the console's 10+ million users. The deal required an Xbox Live Gold membership, but there was no extra fee for access to Netflix. This proved to be a genius partnership. Viewers could queue movies on Netflix's website and play them on TVs with a single click, which might seem pretty normal today, but at the time, this was groundbreaking. By 2010, streaming accounted for over half of Netflix's subscriber activity, driven by new unlimited plans and partnerships with LG, Sony, and TiVo. To go with that Microsoft partnership, the online library expanded to more than 10,000 streaming titles, with TV shows like Breaking Bad becoming insanely popular after hitting the streaming platform. This laid the all-important groundwork for Netflix to shift into original programming, with shows like House of Cards, which would release in 2013. You could say that Netflix destroyed Blockbuster. That's certainly a narrative that many people believe, blaming Netflix for the death of a 90s cult phenomenon, but actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. Netflix was, aside from the sliding doors moment in 2000 when Blockbuster could have purchased the then new business on its own path, the real truth nobody really wants to hear is that Blockbuster destroyed itself. In 2025, Netflix has over 300 million subscribers around the globe. The US is still its largest market with over 81 million users, and the UK makes up 27% of its streaming market share. Annual revenue also grew to an eye-watering $39 billion in 2024, with projections for 2025 reaching an even bigger $44 billion. Netflix also spent $18 billion on content in 2025, including originals like Stranger Things and live sports like NFL Christmas games, which drew 30 million viewers each. It has now moved further into live event streaming, taking on WWE's broadcasting outside the US, with Monday Night Raw streamed every week globally. Streaming now accounts for 36% of total TV viewing time, with Netflix responsible for 18.3% of US streaming minutes. Netflix's early focus on algorithms is one of the biggest reasons for this success. That may sound like a recent concept, but Netflix has been using this method since the DVD by mail days. It all centers around very personalized watch lists, which in turn generate a 93% user conversion rate. The platform's library of 3,800 movies and 1,800 TV shows in the US alone also dwarfs rivals. Speaking of rivals, there are now many: Disney, Apple, and Amazon. Three of the world's biggest media companies now have their own streaming services, but Netflix still stands out. In another timeline, it may have been Blockbuster who owned Netflix, but that never happened. Declining to purchase Netflix in 2000 must be the biggest regret of Blockbuster's now long moved on leadership team. If only they had taken that gamble instead of the many others that didn't pay off. Blockbuster may still be alive today. Netflix has stayed relevant even in a crowded market by remaining quite neutral. It's everyone else who has had to carve out a niche to compete. Amazon Prime relies on Prime membership perks to gain subscribers who already have a membership to Amazon Prime. Disney Plus is all about family content, combining its back catalog with original programming and kids' favorites like Bluey. And Apple TV Plus made everything about prestige, investing in award-winning content featuring huge stars. Netflix, on the other hand, does a bit of everything, making it perfect For anyone who just wants one monthly membership, Netflix now spends $18 billion a year on content. That's more than Disney Plus and Apple TV combined. The profits, however, don't lie. Netflix is as relevant today as it's ever been. Blockbuster, on the other hand, all that remains is that one last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. It now stands frozen in time like a yellow and blue time capsule in a strip mall of Highway 20. Its shelves, once crammed with VHS tapes, now hold DVDs and nostalgia. The scent of popcorn at least lingers on, but that's probably on purpose. It is, after all, a museum, a relic, a quiet reminder of a time when renting a movie was a weekly ritual, not a nightly binge beamed directly into your living room.